Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. One of our viewers, Pro Elite Sports, had sent me a message and asked if I would make a video on, according to me, which places are most likely to implement some sort of flat tax or territorial tax. So first of all, appreciate the suggestion. Any of you who have suggestions, please feel free to put them in the comments below. Let me know. We'd love to produce content that is, based on what it is you'd like. So which are the countries that are most likely to implement some sort of a flat tax, some sort of territorial tax? I'm going to loosely interpret that as a favorable tax regime, okay? And I think it's a super interesting question because, as I've mentioned in some previous videos, there's kind of, in my view, a bifurcation of the tax regimes in the world. One is you have kind of these countries that want to take more and more and more, and others that are competing for tax dollars. And I think that's going to create a really interesting dynamic over the next 10 years or so. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to discuss that with you. Before we do, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell. I really appreciate everyone who supports us by joining this channel and subscribing. Please do that. And if you would like assistance with anything to do with international structuring, either for yourself personally, where to go, how to pay less tax, how to optimize yourself, getting residencies, getting citizenships, or for your company, doing business abroad, even if you're located locally, how to optimize with international tax planning, setting up companies, getting bank accounts, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or you can send us a message through our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, now, so here's the kind of the baseline examination of where we are at today, okay? The baseline of where we are at is you have a bunch of countries that were traditionally very unattractive, okay? And a bunch of these have seen a lot of people leaving. Now, it's worth noting that there's a tax revenue equation that you can look at, which is number of people multiplied by average tax rate multiplied by average rate of income to which that tax rate is applied, okay? And so that gives you the total revenue. Now, if we look at it from that standpoint, it's not just about increasing the tax rate, because if you increase the tax rate, you may decrease your number of people. And so actually the best way to go is to try and increase the number of people and or especially increase the income of the people, okay? And over the last few years, we've definitely seen a trend where certain countries have started to realize this. And the poster child I'm going to use is Greece. I've done some videos previously on how they brought in this €100,000 flat tax that can be applied to high net worth individuals, as well as the retired people's, like the pensioners' tax rate, very low, as well as there's one for digital nomads, which is like a 50% decrease in tax. Italy has something, Portugal has something. We're starting to see more of this type of thing emerge, and I think that that's going to be a general trend, okay? Why did that happen? It happened because basically 500,000 Greeks, typically the most productive, industrious, hardworking, income-producing Greeks, left, all right? And the erosion of that tax base was significant. If you think about EU regulations, hey, listen, people are allowed to go to anywhere they want. You have free movement of people, goods, and capital, and this was not so good for Greece. We're seeing something similar in various other parts of the world. Of course, we've seen places like Bulgaria, which a number of years back lowered the tax rate to a flat 10%. We've seen things with Estonia, Latvia kind of following course. Poland trying to modify in that direction now. Georgia, of course, kind of copied them. These are places that, really, why are you going to go there, right? Why are you going to go and set up a company in Estonia? Well, you have to give you some incentives to draw you in, right? If you're saying, hey, listen, why are people going to go to Germany? Like, is Germany likely to implement some special tax regime? No. Why? Why would they, right? Why would they? They're going to sit there and they're going to say, hang on, rich people aren't paying their fair share. We should wealth tax them. We should whatever. And unless they're in a point where they feel the pain of that, it's unlikely that they are going to change, right? So if I ask the basic question of which places are likely to implement more favorable tax regimes, I think it's quite clearly countries that feel the need to attract people. And I would say these are either forward-looking, traditionally unattractive places, right? Good examples being some of the Eastern European places, or countries that were previously good that now have seen an exodus of people. And so this has traditionally been Southern Europe, right? Southern Europe has really suffered. We've already got great regimes in Italy. I'm going to do a video on that. Great regimes that they've brought in to a large extent into Greece. Great regimes that they've got in Malta in some form, in Cyprus. Portugal has the NHR. Spain has not really caught on very well yet. Yeah, they have the Beckham law, but they were actually eroding that. I suspect that you will get to a point where Spain will give tax incentives to come. I don't think that we're at that stage yet. I think we are maybe 5+ years off. I don't know, maybe like 5 to 10 years off before they kind of like wake up and realize. I think they're a little bit like California. I view Spain as the California of Europe, and they're just kind of too arrogant and ignorant right now to figure it out. But I think eventually they will have to realize that, because they're going to have more and more people leaving as they just have this oppressive tax regime. I think to some extent they get away with the fact that there's a lot of corruption there. People will bribe officials. They'll, do various different things in order to get away without paying the taxes. But that's not going to last. And they'll reach some point where they're going to start to really notice losing people. And as they start to notice losing people, they're going to have to say, hey, where do we capture tax revenues? I don't really think that Germany's going to want to support them indefinitely, which is basically what's happened in the past year or so. They've given quite a lot of money from the EU. And so, yeah, at some point I see that being a turning point, but I don't think we're very close to that yet. Other places that might be interesting. I mean, obviously, again, UK and Ireland have a non-dom program. There's kind of some incentives in New Zealand, although New Zealand just raised their taxes at the top level. So I don't see those going in that direction. I don't think you're going to see places like Australia, etc. I think you may see some forward-thinking Asian countries. If I look at the situation that Malaysia's in right now, they are kind of on a precipice. They have really bad leadership right now. They really need to say, hey, listen, let's get rid of our current leadership and have kind of some reinvigoration. And if they do, kind of coming out of the last year and a half, 2 years, probably by the time things kind of start to open up, I think they're going to be in a really tough spot, which creates some great buying opportunities from an investment standpoint if they can sort out their government issues. But I think also you're going to have a lot of people who are, poor, and so they're going to say, hey, listen, our economy's not doing well. What do we do to attract people? And they already have a history of doing that with MM2H, etc. So I think there's a reasonable chance that, although they've made the Labuan regulations worse over the last while, they may reinstate a lot of things and or come up with new regimes to attract people. I think you may see that with a couple places. Other areas that I think you may see it are, again, some of the Eastern European countries. They're already fairly attractive. Which ones specifically would be of interest is a very good question. I don't, just talking to politicians in Bulgaria, I think that Bulgaria will be one of those. Maybe you would find something come into place in places like Macedonia. They tend to, Northern Macedonia has some views on this. Hard for them to attract people, but maybe that would be workable. You may see some more things coming out of, Romania has been a little bit forward thinking in that regard with their micro-business regime. You may see something a little bit in that regard. They don't have that kind of same super negative mindset. I think you could see something in Ukraine, which would be interesting. You may see something in Turkey. That will be a little bit more questionable. And then there's obviously some parts of Latin America that also they've already, you saw some things with just kind of competing with Brazil. I would say that whole environment is very bureaucratic and kind of a little weird and different, but may go that direction. There may be a few countries in there. Obviously, zero tax countries, I think that the likelihood is we're going to have less zero tax countries, not more zero tax countries, so I don't see that playing a role here. I don't think that countries in the Middle East are going to suddenly say, hey, listen, let's go and give better tax policies than we've already got. They may become more welcoming. They may do some things to draw people into places like Qatar, etc. But tax-wise, I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think you're going to find places like China, Japan, Korea, etc. trying to bring in people. That's not the case. You may see it with Thailand. Thailand's pretty cognizant of what it is that they're surviving off of foreigners, and so that could be interesting. If Bali was on its own, I would think maybe they would, but because they're part of the larger Indonesia, I'm a little bit more skeptical. Pakistan has actually had some interesting incentives for people going into tech, and so you may see kind of some of those countries offer some sort of incentives. We'll see. Also, interestingly, Kazakhstan has formed some free trade zones, so kind of trying to mirror, but not doing a very good job of it yet, what's going on in UAE. It's possible that we could see some more spurring of things there. I think that's a little bit dependent on what happens with oil, with their population, etc. But I do think there is some possibilities that you get a little bit of that. I don't think France is there yet. I think France is probably going to get much worse. Same thing, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Norway, etc. I think they're all thinking that they're quite happy. So I don't think you will see those. But that would be kind of my basic thesis. I think that some of these countries that are forward-thinking will do it, and countries that are desperate will do it. So I think if you want to understand which places these would be, go and take a look at where the demographics are that people are leaving and say, hey, listen, what do they have to do to attract people back in? I think that's one big key indicator. Or where do you have a forward-thinking government like they have in Estonia? So those would be my perspectives. We'll see, again, the timelines a little bit more interesting, because what we're seeing over the last year is the implementation of a lot of digital nomad visas. And I think increasingly you'll see moves to attract certain targeted groups of people. What we've seen so far is 3 groups, right? Pensioners, digital nomads, and high net worth individuals. And these kind of make sense because you can say, okay, great, you can come here, you can live here, but you're not allowed to use our services, and we'll give you tax incentives for doing that. That's probably the model of what will happen until it gets significantly large, such that, you get attention, and then there'll be an interesting spur, because there's a lot of people. Like, if you consider the size of the voting base from Southern Europe and compare that to Northern Europe, you can't push them around quite the same way as you can push around Malta. So anyway, hope that helps. Would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know, which places do you think are likely to have more favorable tax regimes in the future versus which ones do you think are going to have less favorable tax regimes? I think maybe the less favorable is more obvious, but more favorable would be an interesting one. So put it in the comments below. I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.